Alright, so one of the first things you're going to want to do is clean off that brake dust that's on all that stuff. And you can see that I've got a paper towel, and you can see that I've got newspapers on the floor there, because when you use the good old-fashioned O'Reilly's brake cleaner and you spray this stuff off, if it drips on down on your concrete, it's going to stain it, and it looks awful. So I'm actually going to use a rag and this cleaner to try to get this stuff clean. It's just good practice to keep this stuff clean. And of course, the brake cleaner shoots out at about 100 miles an hour, so you want to go easy on that. Make sure you have good ventilation wherever you're working on this stuff. This brake cleaner smells horrible and it can be dangerous. I had a buddy pass out years ago from using this stuff in his garage in the wintertime, and he was running a kerosene heater in his garage, and I guess the combination of the fumes and the kerosene heat and all that stuff like to kill them. Alright, so you get all that stuff cleaned off, and then the first thing you're going to want to do, right down the side here, that star wheel there you see, this is the adjuster. When this thing's working right, it's kind of hard to see when it's all on the car, but this will keep the tension, it'll keep the brake shoes pushed out. Okay, so the more that this screw is extended from the housing that it sits in, the further out your brake shoes push against the brake drum, and it's important for that to be adjusted properly. That way there's no, when you go to hit the brakes, there's not a whole lot of travel for your brake shoes to press up against the brake drum. Okay, if this is not adjusted correctly in here, then every time you hit the brake pedal, your brake shoes have to travel out to hit the brake drum, and that causes that, can be a cause of that spongy brake feeling. So, but what we need to do when we're taking this off, or we're taking this apart, is we need to take the tension off of all the springs, and one good way is to back that adjuster all the way off. And I'm going to do this with 2 screwdrivers. One, you push back up in here. There's a plate back here that keeps that star wheel adjuster from going the wrong way. In this case, we want it to go the wrong way because we're going to back it off. We're going to take the tension off. You have to push that adjuster back, that keeper back, so that we can move the adjustment wheel the opposite direction. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me see if I can show you here. So if we're going to adjust it to make it tighter against the brake the shoes against the drum, I would move it up, and you hear how it clicks. That's those gears on that star wheel clicking against that, I guess it's like a keeper piece back here. And then if I try to go the other way, I can't, because those teeth are locked against that keeper plate back there. So if I push back on that keeper plate with a small screwdriver, now you can see I can move this wheel down. And I'm going to back it all the way down and get all the tension off of it. Alright, that's it. So all the tension is now off of that, or all that we can get is off of that. Okay, so there's 3 main parts to taking this whole thing out. 3 main screws, or springs I should say. There's 3 main springs. So one of them is here at the bottom. There's one end of it, there's the other end. So this spring has to come loose as it ties the two brake shoes together. You have this spring up top. There's one end of it, and you can clearly see the spring. Here's the other end of it. That ties the top of the brake shoes together. And then you have these on either side that hold the brake shoes against the backing plate. So those are the main parts that hold all of this together. And then this adjustment piece is just going to fall out basically when we get the springs loose. The top of the brake shoes will come out of the wheel cylinder, and it looks like there are some of the inserts that go into the wheel cylinder that we'll have to be careful we don't lose, or we don't want to puncture the ends of the wheel cylinder either. I've done that before inadvertently when working on these things. And then you have a brake fluid leak, then you got to replace the wheel cylinder. And then the other part of this is on the back shoe. On each side is the parking brake bracket, and when you pull the parking brake lever on the inside of the car, it pulls the cable which comes up through the bottom here, and then it activates this, or pulls this lever, which pushes this shoe out against the brake drum. And that's what your parking brake is when you have drum brakes. So that's the main components of it. I'm going to try to start by taking this bottom this bottom spring off first, and then we'll work to the top spring, and then we'll do the two springs on the sides. And like I said, they make special brake hardware removal kits, tools, of which I don't have here, but you can just use a good pair of channel locks to do a lot of this. Okay, so there's one spring out of the way. Don't worry about breaking it. The odds are good that you probably won't. These things are tough. If you do, don't worry. All of these springs can be replaced in a hardware kit. I think the kit for both sides of this car, of a car like this, is about 15 bucks. I chose not to replace all these springs because this car it's 2011, it's 7 years old. If it was 20 years old, I might do it, but not on this one, not yet. So there's one. Okay. Now let's see if we can get this one out. Close. Okay, comes that end of it. Get this end out or not. Yep, there. Okay, that end's out. So now the only thing holding that adjuster in place is just the brake shoes, and we can probably spread this far enough apart. We can get this whole assembly out of the way, just like that. And this is the adjuster assembly, and this end of it, and this has been the case on every car I've ever had. This just comes off, and that is what allows this thing to adjust out. See how it's adjusting out of it without this whole thing needing to spin. It just kind of floats on that end of it. Okay. So try to pay attention to how you took this out. See, on this car, this keyed side was on the inside, and over here the keyed side was on the outside of the brake shoe. So try to keep that orientation, because if you get it wrong, you're going to have a hard time getting this back together without having a huge fight. Oh, and there is another spring. This has been a while since I've done this. You can see this spring right here. Okay, so, and it curls up under here, and this goes up into the back part of this. I don't know. This is that keeper plate I was telling you that keeps that star adjuster from going the wrong way, from making itself looser. So you take a good pair of needle nose, a good pair. And then what you're going to do is you're going to push this thing in, and then you're going to turn it 90 degrees, and it's going to come off of this like a cross keeper here. And you see I've got my hand on the back of this. The tip of this thing, and I'll show you all this when it comes out, this is the tip of this, I don't know what you call it, like a stud, and it comes through the outside or through the inside of the backing plate. It goes all the way through. Sometimes when you push this spring down, it tends to push that stud all the way out of the backing plate, and you're just kind of fighting against yourself. So you find the end of it, it kind of feels like a nail head back here. Keep your finger on it, and then squeeze your pliers tight. Push, and then rotate 90 degrees, and you'll see that thing just comes right off. There's a special tool to do that. It kind of cups around that whole spring head, and it's much easier to do than using those needle nose, but they work also. So now I'm going to push this stud looking piece out of the back, see, and then it just comes out that way. Like I said, it feels like a nail head back there because that's exactly what it looks like. Okay, and at this point, this shoe is probably ready to come off. Remember, and that it didn't come out, but remember, in your wheel cylinder up here, you've got these little, it's like a, I don't know what you would call that. They're like, it's like the, a keeper for the brake shoe so that it knows exactly where it needs to be in that wheel cylinder. Sometimes they come out when you take the shoe off. Sometimes they don't. So now that we've got the shoe off, and so I was wrong about having to take the spring off beforehand. You don't. But what you will have to do is take it off and then transfer this whole works onto your new brake shoe, which I have over here. And so it's always good to compare the new against the old anyway, just to make sure they're the right pieces. And it looks like they're the right pieces. Make sure all the holes are the same, and it looks like we've got all the same holes here that we need. So in this case, that bracket and spring we're going to have to transfer over to this shoe. So it's just a matter of taking the spring off here, and then you just slide this off of this pin, and it slides onto this pin, and you pull the spring down in this hole, and then the shoe's ready to go on. And you can see here, these brake shoes aren't like too terribly worn down, but they've got some wear on them. The main point here was that they were out of adjustment to the brake drums. So now we're going to have brand new shoes. We're going to have it adjusted properly, and I think our brake pedal is going to be perfect. And you just got to pull this thing out of this hole, and then it's going to slide eventually. Got to push that thing out through that hole, then it just slides off the back of that pin. Started on the pin first. Okay, so now that part is through that hole. Got it on the pin. Our spring didn't come off the top, but what we need to do is get it back down into this hole. You might even be able to do this with your hands, getting it back in there. Okay, just like so. Now that shoe is ready to go back on.